I had sold most of my furniture before the cross-country move, and my new apartment looked like a museum exhibit on minimalism. Craigslist became my best friend for finding decent stuff without breaking the bank. I had already scored a coffee table and some lamps with no problems, so I felt pretty confident about the whole process. One evening, after scrolling through listings, I found a gorgeous leather recliner for just $150. The photos looked professional, and the description mentioned it was barely used, just taking up space after a divorce. I messaged Steve immediately and got a response within an hour. He seemed friendly enough over text, and when I mentioned my transportation situation, he offered to deliver it himself using his company van. I reread the listing carefully. Same wall in every photo, no clutter. The leather looked smooth with straight seams. The measurements matched the corner by my window perfectly. I marked the baseboard with blue painter's tape so I wouldn't second guess it later. We went back and forth, cash on delivery, 2 short flights of stairs. He said he had a dolly and straps. After the first smiley emoji, his replies became clipped. No problem. Got it. 2 p.m. Saturday. I said yes, and he said he would text when he was on his way. I checked his other posts. A dresser and patio chairs, same background, normal prices. I took screenshots and left it at that. I didn't send my exact address yet. I told him I would confirm the day before. Friday, he followed up. Still good? I sent the building number and cross street. He asked about the back alley. Chained, front only, I replied. What floor? Second. He sent a thumbs up and said he would be 10 minutes early or late depending on traffic. When he asked about stairs, I measured the narrowest point with tape, 31 inches. The recliner width would be tight on the turn, but the feet looked removable. He said he would bring a screwdriver. I told him I would keep the door propped so we wouldn't fumble. On Friday, I also mentioned that the side streets filled after 5 p.m., but weekends were better. No street cleaning, no game traffic. He said he would call when parked after another drop. When I tidied up, I slid a folded towel along the wall so the feet wouldn't mark it, and tucked the rolled rug upright. I checked the peephole and the angles I would walk through. I watched the bus at 1:45 p.m., then again at 1:55 p.m., and noted the space turnover. I kept my hand on my phone and bumped the volume up 1 notch. When the van passed the first time, the mirrors were clean and the rear bumper had a small dent. No roof rack, no magnets. The driver didn't look at numbers. He moved steady, like he already knew the block. On the second pass, when he stopped in front of my window, he let his face track left to right like he was counting panes. It felt less like "where am I?" and more like "what's inside?" I typed, "Need help with parking?" and then deleted it. At 2:18 p.m. I checked the hall. Empty. I nudged the envelope deeper into my pocket and dimmed my phone so the screen wouldn't glare. At 2:25 p.m., I straightened the towel strip and thumbed back through the thread. The last thing from him was 2 p.m. works. Saturday morning, I tidied, rolled up the rug, and cleared a straight path from the door. I set a wedge by the threshold, put my keys on the hook, and slid the cash into an envelope in my pocket. My phone was charged and the ringer was on. By 1:30 p.m., the block was quiet. 2 open spots sat right out front. I texted, "See you at 2," and waited by the window. The plan was simple. Door open, chair in, cash paid. At 2 o'clock, I heard a van and leaned toward the glass. A white panel van rolled past slowly. No branding, no ladder rack, no side windows. It eased in front of my window, idled, then kept going and turned the corner. I waited. No text. I nudged the door open with the wedge and stood in the hall to listen. A bike clicked by. Someone talked about bread down the row. No sliding door sounds, no dolly. 2:06 p.m. At 2:12 p.m., the same white van came back slower. It stopped directly in front of my window. I could see a cap and sunglasses, one hand on the wheel. No hazards, no wave. He just stared at my windows like he was counting something. After a few seconds, he rolled a car length and paused again, then took the corner like nothing on the street could hurry him. I watched the empty space he left. The bus hissed at the corner. I didn't step outside. I moved my glass off the counter edge and kept the envelope in my pocket. My phone stayed blank. I typed, "Are you outside?" Then, "White van just passed. Is that you?" The message sent and sat there. No dots, no delivered. I toggled airplane mode and checked the bars. Full service. I looked back through the window and waited. 10 minutes passed. I held my heel against the wedge so it wouldn't slip. 2:22 p.m. The van ghosted past the far corner, but didn't turn down my block. It drifted along the cross street and vanished behind a brownstone. No brakes, no doors, no voice. I sent, "You close?" The bubble turned blue and froze. My phone stayed in my hand, and my other palm stayed on the door frame. I let the door close to catch, then set the wedge again. I pictured the angle of the turn on the stairs, then stopped doing that because it didn't matter until he was actually here. The street was quiet for a long minute. A plastic bag skittered along the curb and stuck to a drain. Somewhere above me, a door clicked. I tracked each sound without moving from the threshold. The screen was bright and empty. I sent, "Let me know ETA." Same thing. Blue bubble, no dots, no red. 2:29 p.m. The 2 open spots were still there, waiting to make this easy. I typed, "Are you outside?" and sent it, but my message just hung there without any response. After 30 minutes of waiting, it became clear that Steve wasn't coming. I sent another text, then tried calling, but the number went straight to a disconnected message. The automated voice cut me off twice. I checked the thread again and scrolled to the top like I had missed something. It didn't change anything. I put the wedge back in the drawer, closed the door, and slid the envelope into the kitchen drawer. I stared out the window at the 2 empty spots that never got used. I watched a dog walker pass, then a couple with a stroller, and then the street went quiet again. I set the rug back down and pushed the coffee table to its old place. I unplugged the charger and set my phone on the counter. I wasn't going to keep standing by the glass like a sign. I cleaned up the tape and folded the towel. The blue line on the baseboard looked dumb now, so I pulled it slowly so the paint wouldn't lift. I carried my trash down to the bin and locked the door when I came back in. I checked the knob twice, then the deadbolt, then pushed my palm flat against the wood to feel it set. I made the best of it. I ordered noodles and ate on the floor, then let Netflix run. A cooking show, then half of a crime doc, then the ceiling for a while. I stopped checking my phone. When it buzzed, I didn't get up. And when I finally did, it was just a delivery promo and a calendar notification. Around midnight, I brushed my teeth and turned off lights. I walked the same path I had cleared for the chair out of habit, then laughed once and stopped. I set my empty glass in the sink and turned the faucet a quarter turn so it wouldn't drip. The lock sat in the same place I had left it. I flipped the chain up and then down again, just checking. Right then, I heard the distinct sound of my front door opening. The hinges always squeaked something awful, and I had been meaning to get them fixed for weeks. The squeak dragged long and then cut. No knock, no voice, just the door moving like someone knew the weight to give it. At first, I thought maybe I had forgotten to lock it properly and the wind had blown it open. I stood still and listened for air moving or the click of the frame. Nothing. Then I heard footsteps in my hallway. deliberate and careful, like someone was trying not to wake me up. They paused between boards, like the person counted which ones creaked. I grabbed my phone and crouched behind the bed frame. I dialed 911 and kept my voice low. I gave my address, floor, and said the door just opened and someone was inside. The operator asked if I could lock myself in a room. I sat upstairs and started moving. I kept the line open and tried to keep my steps matched with the old carpet so it didn't shift. The footsteps had stopped at the bottom of my staircase. The house held its breath. Then I heard something that made my skin crawl. A man's voice was calling out my full name. Not loud, but clear enough to carry upstairs. He said it straight, no rush, like he was confirming a name for a package. He wasn't yelling or demanding anything, just repeating my name over and over in this flat, emotionless tone. "Stay on the line," the operator said. "Officers are en route." I whispered that he knew my name. She asked if I could barricade. I pushed my dresser an inch, then another. The voice kept saying my name, same speed, like a metronome. It never asked a question. It didn't change. I told the operator what was happening, and they said officers were already on their way. I kept listening. The voice moved a little, like it turned with each word, but I didn't hear steps. He repeated my name again and again, like he wanted me to answer and give him a direction to follow. I crept into my closet and pulled the door almost shut, leaving just enough of a crack to hear what was happening downstairs. I slid my feet between shoes and pressed my shoulder to the coats to break my outline. I put my thumb over the phone speaker and tilted the mic toward my mouth. The man kept calling my name for maybe 2 more minutes, then suddenly went quiet. The absence felt louder than the voice. I couldn't tell if he had left or was just waiting for me to come down and investigate. I watched the crack for light shift. It didn't. The operator stayed on and counted the minutes. The closet smelled like dust and fabric softener. I barely breathed. Every little sound in the old building seemed amplified. The radiator pinged once, and I stared at the crack until my eyes watered. I tried to pick apart what was the hallway and what was the street. I kept imagining footsteps on the stairs, even though I couldn't really hear anything. I held the phone and waited for the operator to say when they were close. She said the unit was turning onto my block. I pushed the closet door tight against my leg. I didn't move until I heard the knock and a voice yell, "Police," through the front. Then I opened the closet and moved. I told the operator I could hear them, and she said to identify myself by name only when I could see badges. When the police finally arrived about 8 minutes later, they found my front door wide open, but no sign of the intruder. They cleared each room, checked under the bed, and looked inside the shower. The hallway rug sat slightly crooked, like a heel had caught it. The deadbolt sat in the unlocked position, and the chain hung down. The lock had definitely been picked, not forced, which suggested someone with experience. The officer showed me a tiny trace on the latch where a tool had scraped the brass. He shined a light along the strike plate and pointed out how clean it looked around the latch tongue. No splintering, no pry marks, just careful work. They asked what I heard, what time, what name he used. I told them the exact words. I told them the voice never changed and never came up the stairs. I pointed to the path I had cleared earlier and how the sight line went straight to the kitchen. They told me to check if anything was missing. Nothing was out of place. A drawer sat slightly open that I didn't remember leaving like that. I showed them my phone log and the listing screenshots. I explained the delivery plan, the van circling, the number going dead. One of the officers wrote down a plate from a neighbor who thought it looked familiar, but he wasn't sure. They asked if anyone else had my name posted outside. I said only the mailbox had initials. I immediately thought about Steve and that white van circling my house earlier. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental, and the fact that his phone number was already disconnected made it seem like a planned setup rather than a random break-in. When I was 20 and studying theater in Nashville, I was desperate for any opportunity in the entertainment industry. A classmate named Carol told me she had found some decent gigs through Craigslist's creative section, so I started checking it daily. I did it like homework: scroll, read, save, refresh. I told myself I would only answer posts that looked legitimate. No weird vibes, no cash-only meetups. I still needed rent money and a line on my resume, so I kept pushing. The posting that caught my eye said extras were needed for a major country artist's music video. It had a clean layout and a Mercury Records logo at the bottom. The ad mentioned 18 to 25-year-old women, natural looks preferred, and shoot dates in early March with pay of $200 for the day. It specified a casting call would be held at a hotel conference room downtown, which seemed normal since production companies often rent those spaces. I emailed my headshot and got a reply the same night from someone named Derek Lansing, who signed off as an assistant casting coordinator. He said I fit the look they wanted and asked if I could come in for a brief interview on Thursday at 3 p.m. He included the hotel name and a room number. That should have been my first red flag, a room number instead of a conference hall, but I convinced myself that smaller productions worked differently. I told Carol about it, and she said it sounded fine, but to keep my phone charged. I also told my roommate the hotel name and said I would text her by 4 p.m. I wore Keens and a plain sweater, nothing flashy, and kept my purse crossbody with my keys in my pocket. When I arrived at the hotel, the lobby looked standard. Clean carpet, a front desk with 2 people working, and a couple of guests checking in. I texted my roommate, then took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The hallway was quiet. I found the room and knocked. A man in his mid-30s opened the door. He was average height, clean-shaven, wearing a polo shirt and khakis. He smiled and said, "You must be Emily. Come on in." The room was just a standard hotel room. 1 bed, a desk, a chair, and a tripod with a camera set up near the window. No lighting equipment, no racks of wardrobe, no other staff, just him. He gestured to the chair by the desk and said to have a seat. I sat down but kept my purse on my lap. He introduced himself as Derek and mentioned he was running auditions all day back to back, so he appreciated me being on time. He asked basic questions. Where did I go to school? Had I done any on-camera work? Was I comfortable being in a crowd scene? I answered quickly and kept glancing at the camera. He noticed and explained that he was filming everyone's audition so the director could review later. That sounded reasonable, so I relaxed a little. Then he asked me to stand and do a slow turn so he could see my profile. I stood and turned, feeling awkward but trying to seem professional. He nodded and said I had the right look. Then he asked if I would be comfortable wearing something more fitted for the actual shoot, maybe a tank top or something that showed my shape. I said sure, depending on the scene. He paused and looked at me for a beat too long. Then he said, "Actually, the director's really specific about body type. Would you mind taking your sweater off so I can get a better sense of your frame?" I froze. The room suddenly felt smaller. I told him I didn't think that was necessary for a crowd scene. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes, and said it was standard for this type of casting. He added that other girls had done it earlier without any issue. I stood up and said I wasn't comfortable with that and that I should probably go. He didn't move from his spot near the door. He said I was overreacting and that this was how the industry worked.
He took a step closer and said if I wanted to be taken seriously, I needed to be more flexible. My hand went to my phone. I said my roommate was waiting for my call and I needed to leave. He stared at me for a second, then stepped aside and opened the door without a word. I walked out as fast as I could without running. I didn't stop moving until I was back in the lobby. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely unlock my phone. I texted my roommate that I was out and heading home. I didn't tell her what happened until later that night. When I got back to my apartment, I pulled up the original Craigslist post. It had been deleted. I searched for Mercury Records and found their actual website. There was no casting call listed, no music video mentioned for that time frame, and no one named Derek Lansing in their staff directory. I reported it to Craigslist, but the post was already gone and the email address bounced back. I thought about going to the police, but I didn't have much to go on. No physical contact, no explicit threats, just a bad situation I had managed to leave. I felt stupid for not seeing it sooner. Carol told me later that she had heard rumors about fake casting calls being used to lure young women into compromising situations. Some were scams for amateur porn, others were just creeps with cameras. She said she was glad I trusted my gut and got out. I never went to another casting call alone after that. I also started researching every opportunity obsessively, cross-checking names, companies, and locations. If anything felt even slightly off, I didn't go. A few months later, I was talking to another theater student who mentioned she had almost gone to a casting call at a hotel, but bailed last minute because it felt weird. When she described the setup, it sounded exactly like mine. Same type of ad, same hotel format, same lone guy with a camera. I told her what happened to me and we compared details. Different room, different day, but the same name, Derek Lansing. She had saved the email and the address was nearly identical to the one I had, just one number off. We reported it to campus security and they forwarded it to Metro Police. I don't know if anything came of it. I never heard back, and I never saw another post like that again. But I also stopped checking Craigslist for gigs entirely. What stuck with me the most wasn't the fear I felt in that room. It was how normal everything seemed right up until it wasn't. The hotel was real, the lobby had people, the guy looked professional. If I had ignored that moment of hesitation, if I had talked myself into complying just to seem easygoing or professional, I don't know what would have happened. I think about that sometimes. How many people explained away that same feeling because they didn't want to seem difficult or paranoid? How many didn't leave when they should have? I share this story not for sympathy, but as a warning. If something feels wrong, it probably is. You don't owe anyone your comfort or your safety just to be polite. You don't need a concrete reason to leave. The feeling is enough. I should have called the police that day. I know that now. Maybe he used different names after. Maybe he moved hotels. Maybe someone else called. I don't know. I write this so someone reading recognizes that drop in the stomach and does not explain it away. If a door feels wrong, you don't have to go through it. I share it so you trust your first no.
During my sophomore year of college in 2019, I was constantly broke and looking for deals anywhere I could find them. Craigslist was my routine. I bought used textbooks, a chipped dresser, and a coffee maker that worked if I hit it. After a few bad messages, I learned the patterns. All caps and gift cards meant scam. Normal punctuation and normal prices meant probably fine most days. I checked the site on breaks, scrolling fast for something I could actually afford. One Thursday, I saw a listing for a box of high-end cosmetics and perfumes, barely used, for $25. The photo showed bottles in a neat row.
Labels faced forward. No filters, no clutter. The post said the seller's girlfriend had left them behind after a breakup, and he just wanted them gone. I sent a message asking if they were still available. He replied within 10 minutes. His name was Matt. He said yes, and we could meet that evening if I wanted. He suggested a grocery store parking lot near campus. I knew the area, so I agreed and said 6 p.m. worked for me. I told my roommate where I was going and sent her a screenshot of the listing and our message thread. She told me to keep my phone out and text her when I was done. I said I would. The parking lot was busy when I arrived. I parked near the entrance under a light and waited. I watched cars pull in and out. Families with carts. A couple loading bags. Everything looked normal. At 6:05 p.m., I got a text from Matt. He said he was there and described his car, a dark blue sedan parked near the side of the lot. I looked over and saw it. The car was older, maybe early 2000s, with tinted windows. He was standing next to it. I grabbed my wallet and walked over. He was tall, maybe in his 30s, wearing a hoodie and jeans. He smiled when I got close and said, "Hey, are you here for the makeup?" I said yes and asked if I could see it. He nodded and gestured toward the trunk. "Yeah, it's all back here." The trunk was already open. I stopped a few feet away and looked inside. It was empty. No box, no bag, nothing. I asked where the makeup was. He said, "Oh, it's under the floor panel. I didn't want it rolling around." He stepped to the side and motioned for me to come closer, like he wanted me to look inside the trunk with him. That's when my stomach dropped. The parking lot suddenly felt too far from the entrance. The light above us flickered. I looked back toward my car and realized I had walked farther than I thought. No one was nearby. The closest person was loading groceries 3 rows over. I told him I actually had to go and that I forgot I had something else to do. He asked if I wanted to see the makeup first. I said no, it was fine, and started backing up. He didn't move toward me, but he didn't close the trunk either. He just stood there, watching me. I turned and walked quickly back to my car. I didn't run, but I didn't slow down. I got in, locked the doors, and drove straight out of the lot. My hands were shaking so hard I had to grip the wheel tighter to keep steady. I texted my roommate that I was on my way back and told her what happened. She called me immediately and stayed on the phone with me the whole drive home. When I got back to my apartment, I checked the Craigslist post again. It had been deleted. I tried to find Matt's messages, but the email address he used wasn't showing up anymore. It was like the whole thing had been wiped clean. I reported it to campus police the next day. The officer took my statement and asked for a description of the car and the man. I gave him everything I could remember. He said they would increase patrols in that area, but without a license plate or proof of a crime, there wasn't much they could do. He also told me that they had received similar reports over the past few months. Women responding to Craigslist ads, meeting sellers in parking lots, and being led toward open trunks or back seats. Some women left like I did. Others weren't sure what the intention was and just felt uncomfortable. No one had been physically harmed, but the pattern was clear. The officer said it could be an abduction attempt, a setup for robbery, or just someone testing how far people would go before they felt unsafe. He didn't have answers, just warnings. He told me to always meet in busy, well-lit areas, and never go to a second location if the first one feels off. I told him I thought the parking lot was safe because it was public and busy. He said predators count on that assumption. They pick places that seem safe enough to get you there, but isolated enough once you're standing in the right spot. After that, I stopped using Craigslist for a while. When I eventually started again, I changed my rules. I only met people during daylight hours, always in front of stores with security cameras, and I brought a friend whenever possible. If someone suggested meeting in a parking lot away from the entrance, I declined. If they pushed back or tried to change the location last minute, I blocked them. I also started paying attention to the small things. If a listing had stock photos or looked too good to be true, I skipped it. If the seller was vague about details or overly eager to meet quickly, I passed. If they asked personal questions or wanted to know if I was coming alone, I stopped responding. A few months later, I was talking to another student in my dorm who mentioned she had responded to a Craigslist ad for designer clothes. She said the seller wanted to meet in a parking lot, and when she got there, the trunk was open and empty. She left before he could say anything. When she described the car and the guy, it sounded exactly like Matt. We reported it together, adding both incidents to the campus police file. I don't know if they ever caught him or if he just moved to a different area. I never saw another post from him, but that doesn't mean he stopped. What bothers me most is how close I came to stepping toward that trunk. If he had been more convincing, if I had been more trusting, if I hadn't felt that instinct to leave, I might have leaned in to look under the floor panel. And then what? I think about that open trunk a lot. How empty it was. How much room there was inside. How he stepped aside like he was making space for me. I told this story to a few friends after it happened, and some of them said I was overthinking it. Maybe he really did have makeup and just forgot to bring it out. Maybe he was awkward and didn't realize how creepy the situation looked. Maybe I misread the whole thing. But I don't think I did. I think I was supposed to step closer. I think that's what he was waiting for. And I think the only reason I'm telling this story now is because I didn't. If you ever find yourself in a situation like this, trust the feeling that tells you to leave. It doesn't matter if you're wrong. It doesn't matter if you seem rude or paranoid. It's better to walk away from 100 awkward situations than to stay for the one that's actually dangerous. I learned that day that safety isn't about being polite. It's about listening to the part of your brain that knows when something's wrong, even if you can't explain it yet. The officer told me to always meet in busy, well-lit areas, to bring someone with me if possible, to let people know where I'm going, to keep my phone charged, to trust my instincts, to meet in public spots only, and never go to a second location if the first is safe. I nodded into the phone, even though I already knew that. I kept thinking about the trunk, about the black mouth of it, about the way he moved aside, so there was room. The rest of the week, I parked under cameras and didn't buy anything used. I never found out what would have happened if I had walked over to that open trunk.
About 2 years ago, my coworker Dave bought his first house and needed furniture for the front porch. We were both 26 and broke, so at lunch we scrolled Craigslist in the break room. Dave wanted a wooden rocking chair he could sand and stain. It felt like an easy win, something small to make the place his. We ignored the usual junk. Then we saw it. Solid oak rocking chair, barely used, $50. The photos were clear and taken from different angles. Grain on the back slats, 2 matching scuffs on the runners, a tiny chip on the right arm. It looked real and heavy. Dave messaged the seller, Mike. The reply came fast and felt normal. Still available, cash only. Could meet that evening around 7 p.m. He sent an address for a tire shop off Colfax. Dave said sure and asked if we could see it before buying. Mike said of course, and he would have it in his truck bed. We clocked out at 5:30 p.m. and grabbed food. By the time we got on the road, it was dark. Dave drove, and I pulled up the address on my phone. It took us east through neighborhoods that thinned out block by block. Fewer lights, fewer cars, more chain link and boards on windows. The GPS said we were 2 minutes away. I zoomed in on the map. The tire shop sat at the end of a side street with nothing behind it but gravel and a field. No gas stations, no traffic, just quiet. Dave slowed at the light before the turn. I looked down the street and saw the shop. Dark. No lights on the sign. No cars parked out front. Just one truck backed into the side lot near a dumpster. I told Dave it looked closed. He said maybe Mike worked there and had access after hours. I didn't answer right away. I zoomed in on the street view and saw the same boarded windows from the photos. The place had been shut down for a while. Then I saw movement. Not one person, 3. They were standing near the truck, spaced out like they were waiting for something. One leaned against the hood. Another stood near the dumpster with his hands in his pockets. The third was closer to the street, watching the light. Dave saw them too. He said, "That's not one guy." I told him to keep driving. He didn't argue. The light turned green and he rolled through without slowing down. I kept my eyes on the side mirror. The guy near the street stepped forward like he was trying to see our plates. Then he pulled out his phone. We didn't talk for the first few blocks. Dave turned twice just to make sure no one was following. I kept checking behind us. No headlights, no truck, nothing. Finally, Dave said, "That wasn't for a chair." I agreed. I told him it felt like a setup from the start. The location was too isolated. The shop was abandoned, and Mike never mentioned having help or other people being there. We pulled into a gas station under bright lights and sat there for a minute. I told Dave to block Mike's number and delete the thread. He did it right there. Then we sat and watched the road for another 10 minutes, just to be safe. On the way back, we talked through the details. Mike had replied fast, almost too fast. He didn't haggle or ask questions. He picked the location and the time without offering alternatives. And when Dave asked to see the chair first, Mike agreed immediately. No seller does that without some confidence they're getting paid. The more we talked, the clearer it became. The chair was bait. The truck was a prop. The 3 guys were the real plan. If we had pulled into that side lot, they would have boxed us in, taken the cash, maybe the car, maybe worse. Dave said he almost didn't notice the other 2 guys. If I hadn't pointed them out, he might have pulled in and parked. We would have been out of the car before we realized what was happening. I told him it was the distance that saved us. Stopping at the light gave us time to look and process before we committed. If we had been closer, instinct would have told us to follow through, park, get out, be polite. By then, it would have been too late. We reported it when we got home. I called the non-emergency line and explained what happened. The officer took the address and said they'd send a unit to check it out. He also said they'd gotten similar reports in that area over the past few months. Craigslist meetups that turned into robberies. Usually electronics or furniture. Always isolated locations. Always multiple suspects. He told us we did the right thing by leaving. He said most victims don't realize what's happening until they're already out of the car. By then, they're surrounded and can't get back in. He also said the chair probably didn't exist. It was just a reason to get people to show up with cash. Dave never tried buying furniture on Craigslist again. He said it wasn't worth the risk, even for a good deal. I agreed. We started checking Facebook Marketplace instead, and only met people in parking lots during daylight hours. A few weeks later, Dave told me he saw a news report about a string of robberies in that same area. 3 men were arrested after someone fought back and got their license plate. The details matched what we saw. Same tire shop, same setup,
Same truck backed in near the dumpster. The victims described the same pattern. They showed up for furniture or electronics, found multiple people waiting, and either got robbed or managed to leave before it escalated. One guy said they pulled a knife. Another said they blocked his car and demanded his wallet. Dave and I realized how close we came. If we had pulled in, if we had gotten out, if we had hesitated even a second longer, we would have been part of that report. What stuck with me most was how normal everything seemed until it wasn't. The listing looked real. The photos looked legitimate. The seller sounded polite. The location had an address and a business name. Everything checked out until we were close enough to see it didn't. I think about that a lot now. How easy it is to explain away the warning signs because you want the deal to be real. How much effort scammers put in to make everything look legitimate until the moment you're vulnerable. I also think about the light. If we had been 30 seconds faster, we would have missed it. We would have turned down that street without slowing down, without seeing the extra guys, without having time to process. The light gave us distance, and distance gave us clarity. Dave said later that he almost ran the yellow because he didn't want to keep Mike waiting. He said something in his gut told him to stop, and he listened without knowing why. That pause, that hesitation, that gut feeling, it saved us. I share this story because I want people to know that setups like this are common. They're not just in bad neighborhoods or late at night. They happen in broad daylight. They happen to people who think they're being careful. They happen because scammers know how to make everything look normal until it's too late. If you ever find yourself driving to a Craigslist meetup and something feels off, trust it. If the location is too isolated, turn around. If there are more people than expected, leave. If your gut tells you something's wrong, don't explain it away. We got lucky. We had distance and a red light and just enough time to see what was waiting for us. Not everyone does. The chair wasn't real. It gave us a clean exit without an argument. After that, the view from a distance did the rest. It turned a weird feeling into a clear picture. I still think about how fast it could have gone wrong. If we had rolled past the light and pulled behind the tire place, I don't know what would have happened. I know it wouldn't have been a chair. I know we wouldn't have had time to think.
This story takes place in November of 2017, and I was 18 years old. I'm a very short woman, only about 4'10". I get anxious when someone even looks at me in a way that suggests they might not like me. So, needless to say, I'm incredibly non-confrontational. My friend and I were out shopping. It was something we'd do maybe every few months, just to bond since we didn't have much time to hang out due to college. She's just like me, barely scraping 5'1" and very non-confrontational. It's probably why we became friends. On every shopping trip, we would find ourselves in an Ann Summers store. We're both overly endowed and struggled to find bras anywhere. Ann Summers always had great sales, so we grabbed the cheap bras while we could. This shopping trip wasn't any different. We browsed shops until we got to Ann Summers. But that's when things took a bit of a turn. I'd barely stepped foot into the shop when a woman with some sort of Slavic accent stopped me. Her finger jammed into my chest. "Spit the gum out," she demanded. Assuming that she was an employee, I gave a very sheepish, "I'm really sorry," and ran out of the shop to spit the gum out and throw it away. When I went back in, I realized that this woman was not an employee. She was a customer who was browsing and happened to be near the door when my friend and I entered the shop. It should have been obvious to me at the time. No salesperson would ever behave like that, not one that wanted to keep their job anyways. But I kept my head down when I walked past her,
holding my breath in hopes that she wouldn't notice me again. She didn't, and I thought I was in the clear. My friend and I browsed the shop, trying to avoid the woman. But the shop wasn't very big, probably only 15 feet by 18 feet. So eventually, I ended up at the sales stand by the door where she had been stood. I tried to keep my distance while browsing. I was looking at the price tags, but realized that I didn't know what the discount was, so I leaned over slightly to check the discount sign. It's important that I note that this woman had a pushchair, which is a stroller for the Americans. And you'd think that she'd maybe had a child in this pushchair, but no. It was full of plastic carrier bags. I didn't look too much at it, but I could tell that everything in there was double-bagged and tied shut. Whatever was in those bags, she wanted to protect. This sense of protection became very relevant because when I leaned over to look at the discount sign, I was leaning slightly closer to her pushchair. I was still about 3 feet away from it, but apparently that was too close. The woman was on the other side of the chair, but the moment she saw me, she ran around to it where I was stood. She hit me in the face. It was somewhere between a slap and a punch, and I couldn't quite tell because I was in shock. All I knew is that it hurt. "Watch the personal space," she hissed in my ear. And I apologized to her. This woman just hit me, and I apologized to her. I regret it now, but at the time I didn't want to provoke her any further. Not that I knew what I did to provoke her in the first place. And in my shock, I turned around and ran to the back area, grabbing my friend's hand and pulling her with me. The back area was separated by a tiny wall that only stretched halfway across the shop, since they stored the adult toys there and wanted to keep them out of sight of the general public. I stood there holding my friend's hand and shaking as I whispered, "She just hit me," to my friend. And we stood there for a good minute in silence. My friend was positioned in a way that she could see the rest of the store, while I hid behind the wall. "She's gone," my friend told me. And I let out a breath that I didn't even know that I was holding. "Can we stay here for a while?" I asked my friend, worried that the woman would be outside waiting for me. The front of the store was open, but she could have easily just been a couple of feet down the road and out of sight, waiting for me to leave. My friend agreed, and we slowly browsed the shop again. About 5 minutes later, we got to the counter to check out, and the girl working the counter looked outside and then back at us. "That woman's been in here for 30 minutes. I didn't know what to do," she told the two of us. "What did she say to you?" "She told me to spit out my gum when we first came in, and then she hit me because I was too close to her." "She hit you?" The worker was wide-eyed. "If I had have known that, I would have called security. I'm so sorry." I smiled and shrugged. "It's fine." It wasn't really fine, but it wasn't the worker's fault. She didn't look much older than I did, and I wouldn't have known what to do in that situation either. Still shaken up, my friend and I made our way out of the store. I looked around but didn't see the woman. "Can we just go home now?" I asked my friend. We hadn't finished browsing all the shops, but I was so paranoid that we'd bump into that insane woman again. She agreed, and we got the bus home. When I got home, my parents encouraged me to report the incident to the police. I called the non-emergency line, and their answer was basically, "Well, what do you expect us to do about it?" Unless I went back to the Ann Summers and requested the security footage, which I wasn't sure if they actually had, they wouldn't do anything. It's been just over 3 years now, and I'm sure that that woman was likely to have been homeless and/or on drugs. It's the only explanation I can think of for the carrier bags, her protectiveness. It was either everything she owned, or drugs, or maybe even both.